So I am a father of five. Before COVID, as you might see from the background, I wasn't using my home office very much. So I let my 13 and 15-year-olds make it their comic book room. And of course, now this is where my business is. So you get to see half of my life behind me. I have built and sold 2 digital agencies. And when I say digital agencies, that's building websites, mobile applications, helping brands with their content strategy. And so I've had a lot of opportunity to work with various leaders in corporate America, which will come into play in just a minute. And I'm currently running Dragon Army, which is a similar type digital agency, but it's running on the Great Game. And so we'll get into that. I have had the great opportunity to be a part of a lot of different nonprofits, but specifically I've founded 2, 48 and 48 and Ripples of Hope. I will talk more about 48 and 48 as we go through this. And then I'm a student of leadership. And so I've written 2 leadership books. One's called The 5-Day Turnaround. That was my first book. And that's really, it's going to be a lot of what we talk about today. It's the idea of leading like an entrepreneur. So what I found, as I mentioned, working with corporate America, is that there's a mindset that some leaders have and other leaders don't. And it really doesn't matter if they are, running a startup. It's an entrepreneurial mindset. And so I spent a lot of time pulling out what I thought the characteristics of a successful entrepreneur were. And I put them into that book. And again, that's the crux of what I want to talk to you all about today. And then in April or May of this year, I wrote The Crisis Turnaround, which is sort of a follow-on book, but it's specifically for leading during a crisis. And I do mention the Great Game in that book and how the transparency helps leading during a crisis, the problem solving that can come only from running a program like the Great Game can help you get through a crisis. So those are my 2 leadership books. What I'm going to do is there's 4 vital traits of leadership that I'd love to share with you all today. And I'm going to tell those through a bit of my entrepreneurial journey. So it all started, I actually went to UNC Charlotte, so in North Carolina near you, Darren, to go to school. And it was there that I met my college roommate, and we decided to start a business around web development. We were super passionate about the web. This was 98, 97, 98, when the web was new. And so we just started building a website and we started a company. When we graduated, we moved, and this is a picture of Raj and I, that was my college roommate, in the basement of my parents' home. That was where we lived, and that's where we set up shop. So we're a year into the business, and I have to put business in quotes. We were 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds. We didn't really know how to build a business. Raj was traveling around the world because his parents had given him a ticket to go travel the world when he graduated. So he was building websites at nights and weekends when he wasn't snowboarding. You can see a snowboard in the picture there. I was coaching tennis. So I played tennis at UNC Charlotte. I was coaching tennis during the days, building websites at nights. And we actually had a third partner who moved into the basement with us, and he was waiting tables at nights to make money and building websites during the day. So Raj finds himself in New Zealand after a year we're in business, and he's talking to someone about building Queenstown.com. If you've ever been to New Zealand, Queenstown is like the adventure capital of the world. So Raj sends me a note and says, "Hey, Jeff, get ready to answer the phone. Somebody's going to call because they want to talk to us about building a website for them." Now, this is the first time the phone in that, basement had ever rung. So I had to find the phone and then practice, Spun Logic. This is Jeff. No, is that too formal? So eventually I answer the phone, and I end up spending an hour on the phone with the guy talking about what he wanted to do with Queenstown.com. At the end of the call, he says, "Okay, so how about this? I'll fly you to New Zealand. We'll spend a week brainstorming on what this could be and see if we can work together. Do you think you can, clear out your other projects or free your schedule to make the trip?" So I was like, "Yeah, sure. I think I can make that happen." So I fly to New Zealand. We're consulting with this guy at the end of the week. So I have to point out, at this point, the largest web project we had done, we got paid $250 for, and it was for my aunt's business in Chicago. So $250 website. We leave New Zealand with a signed contract for a $65,000 website project. I don't even know how we came up with a contract during that week. I think every time we would leave the guy at night, Raj and I would be trying to figure out how to even create a contract. So we signed the contract. I come back to Atlanta. I quit the job at the tennis center. Raj cancels the rest of his trip, moves to Atlanta full time. The third partner that I mentioned quit his job waiting tables. We got office space. It was in the back of a fitness center, but we were, in the office space, committed to building queenstown.com. We spend several months working on the website, and we're going back and forth with the guy. And then after a few weeks, he stops replying to me at all. And I thought that was weird, but maybe he's busy. And then I get a letter from him that says, "Hey, I'm sorry to inform you, but my business has gone bankrupt, and I'm no longer going to be able to support this project." Now, one of the key lessons I learned at that moment was to get some sort of dollars at the beginning of a project. We never got a dime from this company in New Zealand. And here we were, and I thought everything was coming crashing down. Like, we had quit our jobs. We had office space. We had spent months and months on this thing that we were never going to get paid for. At the time, it did feel like the end of the world. But as I look back as an entrepreneur, I wasn't all in on the business. Neither was Raj, neither was our third partner. We were sort of doing it on the side. We had other jobs. We had a steady income from other things. And it was that mentality that I think was holding us back. And so the first big lesson that I think every leader can embrace is this idea of what I call the do or die mindset. An entrepreneur really has to be all in on their business. And I would say that's having no plan B. Like, I have friends in corporate America who are strong leaders, but sometimes they'll say, "You know what, if this doesn't work out," I get called all the time about, new jobs. And so I'll just move to the next brand. I think when you have that mentality, it stops you from pushing through tough situations and really giving something a go. So this is the first trait that I focus on of leadership that I think is vital for someone to be successful. So here we are. So we're a year into the business. We feel like the world's come crashing down on us, but we had to make it work. So if we spend the next 4 years just grinding it out, every year a little bit of growth, but not much, we weren't hitting our stride, and I didn't know why. So then we're in year 5, and I go to this big pitch for a big brand, for a website build. And I end up asking the question to the person making the decision. I said, "Hey, what are you looking for in a partner?" Sometimes when you ask that question, it's not something that they had written down in an RFP. And so the woman looked at me and said, "Well, that's a really good question. I'm actually disappointed because we didn't get the budget I wanted. We actually wanted to work with this other agency called The Chopping Block. They're out of New Orleans. They're super creative. They're known for how creative they are, but we don't have the budget. So we're talking to you and a couple other agencies," which was, a bit of a slap in the face to be, second up, even if we won. We lost that. But I remember going back to the office and I said, to the team, I'm like, "What do we stand for? What's our focus? What's our purpose?" I realized we didn't have anything that anybody could even say we're the best at or we're trying to be the best at. And we definitely didn't have sort of a purpose as a company. So we spent the next month or two thinking about what we were all passionate about. And we ended up landing on this idea of user experience. Now, this was 2004. User experience was a newer term, but we just basically said, all right, that's what our purpose is. We're here to create experiences for the end user that are just incredible. What was important about that is it was the first time we were all on the same page. And so I call that the second sort of principle. Whether you're leading an entire company or just a team or a division, if you don't have a sole focus, a purpose, or a vision for what you're doing, I don't think you can ever hit your full potential. Now, what's important for you guys to know is here's what the first 5 years of my business looked like. So there's the do or die mindset you see happened in year 1. And then in year 5, we landed on our focus. From that point forward, for the next 5 years, we doubled in size every single year. We ended up with close to 100 employees, and then we sold the business to a private equity group in 2008. So I believe it wasn't until we found our focus. And again, I think that can even happen within a team, that if you find a focus that everyone believes in, a purpose that everyone's behind, that can move your team, your business forward more than anything. An interesting thing happened along that curve. As we started to grow, we started to lose the idea of being all in it together. When you're small, and I had, played sports in college, so I knew about teams. When you're small, you end up having everybody in it together, and you feel every bump and every win is a great thing. But as you get bigger and bigger, you start to lose that, and people start joining your company because it's a job, not because they want to be part of the team. So I was searching for a way to bring everyone together the next time I built my company. And that's when I found the great game. So to me, the third component of building a great company, building a great culture, achieving as much as you can as a leader is finding a way to bring everyone together on the same team. And again, the great game has, over the last 5 years with Dragon Army, has allowed me to do that. And again, I can't imagine building a company without it. Now, because you are all well aware of the great game, I thought I'd just hit a few high points of things that I think are important with the great game. The first is, if you can tie it back to that purpose and really layer in the great game with your purpose, that's when all the magic happens. Additionally, if you can find ways to bring your values to play, then everything starts really working together. I sort of take Patrick Lencioni's books and The Great Game of Business and put them together. And to me, that's the building blocks of a great leader and a great company. I'll also say that, financial literacy, again, that's talked a lot about. It has been at this conference. But to me, like, you always have to reinforce that. As much as you think people are understanding everything that's going on, they're not in finance for a reason, right? And then certainly finding fun ways and bringing everyone into the huddle are important. But again, there's been great case studies on that during this conference, and I've learned a lot of things. But it's those first two things that I think maybe don't get talked about quite enough. So I would focus on those. And so then the fourth component that I think when you put all this together, you've got the mindset of the entrepreneur. There's no plan B for you. You found the purpose or the focus of the team or the company, and you're implementing the great game. The next thing is to allow yourself the ability to move quickly and to innovate, to celebrate failure instead of criticizing it. And it's easier to do that in a small team, but it's still difficult for most. So I want to tell the quick story of this idea that I had in 2015. So I'm in Atlanta and I wanted to do something to help the community. And I realized that there were a lot of small nonprofits that needed help building their websites. And there just wasn't enough help for them. So I came up with this idea. What if I could put on a hackathon over a weekend to build? What I came up with was 48 nonprofit websites in 48 hours. Could I bring together 150 volunteers, bring them together on a Friday night, send them home on a Sunday night, and in that period, build 48 nonprofit websites? So in October of 2015, I took my first attempt at that. And here's some shots from that first event. You can see on the wall there's the 48 new websites, because we had judges come and really take a look at which ones told the best story, which were the best rebuilds. Actually got work done, a Falcon player to come and give a talk to sort of spur everybody on. But the point was, I just said, let me just try it, and I'm going to make it as simple as possible. An MVP is what in the startup world we call a minimum viable product. It's like, all right, I'm going to try something, but I'm going to try it, really condense it and see if I can figure it out. At the end of that weekend, people, you can see those people that were standing there, they were coming up to me saying, hey, can I go ahead and sign up for next year? I want to make sure I don't miss next year's event. And at that point I was like, oh, I guess we should do this again next year. I really thought I was just doing it one time. And so we decided to try it again. We did it in New York the next year. And when we pulled that off, we said, all right, this thing now has room to grow. But if I hadn't started small with just people I knew in Atlanta, it never would have continued to grow. So fast forward to today, we've built almost 1,000 nonprofit websites over the last 5 years. We have our October event, which this was at. Now we get well over 500 volunteers to spend the weekend building nonprofit websites. All of that would not have happened had I not been willing to start small. So one example of something you might try is like having an award for people who try things and fail. That's something that most people don't do. It's usually success, but that can be a way to break the mindset into allowing for that speed. So again, a lot of information at you guys, but I think if you can embrace these 4 things as a leader, you can really accomplish anything. And these are the traits that I think successful startup leaders embody. Now, I'd also add, and this is what I want to spend the last 5 minutes or so on, is I found my personal purpose about 6 or 7 years ago. And it has changed everything in my life. I believe that I know why I'm here and why I'm doing the things I'm doing. And it has fueled everything that I do. So I want to talk to you about that. You may have spent time reading Start With Why, Simon Sinek's book. You may have talked a little bit about purpose, but most people I know haven't crystallized what their personal purpose is. And I think as a leader, if you can have that and bring that to the table, everything you do will have rocket fuel on it. So first thing I want you to do is I want you to think about, what is your superpower? What is it about you that is unique, that's different, that when you do it, you get fired up? An example might be, you're a matchmaker. You really love putting people together, or even partnerships with companies together. Maybe that's your superpower. Whatever it is, think about that and really try to isolate the thing that you do that is unique. For me, it was building businesses and bringing people along, sort of building a movement. That's what I figured was the thing that I do best. The second thing I want you to do is think about the change that you want to see in the world. What is it that you get passionate about fixing? What's the wrong or the injustice in the world that you want to right? Okay. And then you put those together, and that's when you start to figure out what your purpose is. Okay. After you do that, it's finding focus areas to focus that energy. Okay. So, here's an example of my focus areas. I have 3 areas in my life that are most important. First is my family. Second is Dragon Army, which is my for-purpose business, but it's a business that I want to be a force for good in the world. I'm a big believer in conscious capitalism, and business is actually helping the world versus taking from the world. And then doing good is the third bucket, which 48 and 48 would fall into. So everything I do, my purpose is to have an outsized positive impact on the world. It has to be outsized because that's the gift that I have. I can build things. So anything that I do, I try to make sure it's hitting in at least one of these circles, ideally right in the center. And I'll give you an example. So 48 and 48, that nonprofit I talked about, certainly Dragon Army participates, but I also have a board made up of some of Dragon Army's clients. So that fits both of those. I also bring my kids to each event, and as they grow, they're starting to actually be able to participate and build websites. So for me, anytime I spend on 48 and 48 helps bring all areas of my life together that are important to me. And that's what's allowed me to write the books and start the companies, because I'm so focused on these things that it allows me to achieve more than I thought possible. So as you think about the 4 lessons that we talked about, if you can add in finding your personal purpose to it, I think that's when everything will really start to take off for you. A lot of my friends that find themselves maybe mid-career and they're looking for I just don't know if what I'm doing has meaning. When I help them go back to finding their purpose, that's when everything starts to make sense. And they do start shifting things and saying no to certain things, but joining other things. So finding your purpose, guys, is probably the biggest thing I can leave you with. So here's different ways you can reach me and get in touch with me. You can email me directly. Also, you can text the word purpose to 66866, and I'll send you the 2 worksheets that I put together around this deck that will help you run the great game more effectively, but also find your purpose. I have a worksheet that helps you dive a little deeper into what I just talked about. Happy to send you anything like that.